Hello?
Hello.
Good to see everybody.
And Mr. Lucas, just let me know when you got everybody that's a panelist into the room.
Will do. They're still joining, so give it a couple more minutes, maybe about 2 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Lucas, can you mute everybody until we get started? Thank you.
I think you can start with the group you have. I'll keep them in as they come in.
Hello.
Yep.
Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Thank everybody for joining us tonight. We are here to have a session to discuss the solutions that eliminate unacceptable patterns and deadly practices in the police department. We have invited a variety of panelists to the table because it'll take all of us to change for the change that is needed. If you do not believe anything need to change, this is not the dialogue for you. If you want to make speeches about how bad things are, this is not the forum for that. This is a space to discuss actionable solutions. We have received over 100 emails from people all over the state asking to defund the police. We hear you. We have heard about the Congress considering a Justice and Policing Act and may want to consider those same ideas locally and statewide. We hear you. We have heard that the governor supports officially banning chokeholds statewide. We may want to make sure that this is not happening locally. We hear you. There is talk, still national talk about misconduct, a misconduct registry. Maybe that could be done statewide and locally. We hear you. People are discussing making no-knock warrants illegal. We hear you. Some people are requesting that dash cams and body cameras be mandatory. We hear you. Some say we must move to ban symbols that have been co-opted by white supremacists and racists in government facilities. We hear you. Now is the time for us to come and put action behind our words. It is time to change policies that will affect our communities. And this is what we want to talk about. This is just the first meeting of a series of meetings that need to take place. So we're going to ask each panelist to talk for about 2 minutes about a solution they're going to bring to the table and a work that they're going to do to make it happen. Because a lot of times what we do is we say things aren't right, but it takes work to get these things changed. And now is the time. Now is the time that we put actions behind our words. We all know it is a problem. We need to change things. And this is what this group hopefully is going to do and beyond, because it's going to take us, our community, and all the stakeholders to actually set the tone for what policing will look like in the city and in the state. And once we get our house in order locally, then we can be a model for others all throughout the state. Like New Haven, most of the time, is a model. So I'm going to turn it over to Senator Winfield, and after him, we'll turn it over to the mayor so you can set this off and set the tone for us. And then Alder Furlow will keep the cue because I don't have my glasses and I don't want to miss anyone. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And if somebody says something that you were thinking, it's okay to say pass and let someone else put their idea on the table. Thank you, Senator Winfield.
Thank you. And first, I want to thank you for the conversations we've had and allowing me to help convene this discussion this evening. I won't be long. I've been in the newspapers and on TV for the last week and a half talking about this. I think everybody knows where I am. What our thinking was that as we endeavor to change state law, that we should be able to hear from our community and others what direction we should be going in and what the solutions are coming from people who have all of the different parts to play, whether it be the police, the community, the activist groups. And so that's how we came to convene this discussion tonight. What I'm hoping is that as President Walker Myers suggested, that we hear some solutions and a little bit, if you have time, about the role you're going to play in making sure that that piece of legislation gets across the finish line, because we need to know who the allies are and what they're willing to do as we move forward to make sure that we don't just make an effort, but that we actually get it done. So I will end there and thank all of you for joining. And Mr. Mayor, it's on you.
Thank you, Senator Winfield. And thanks to President Walker Myers for spearheading this event tonight. There's been a lot of conversations already, but I think that these challenges will require a lot more conversations and listening, which I think is one of the main things that I think is important for a lot of us at the leadership level to do, followed by action. We've talked about a number of things that we can do relatively quickly. Things like reviewing our use of force policy. There's a lot of talk nationally about 8 can't wait. A lot of those 8 we already have in our general orders, but the language, the chief and I agree, could be strengthened. And that's everything from banning chokeholds to shooting at a moving vehicle to a duty to respond. And we're having conversations about how that language can be strengthened. As you know, President Walker Myers, there's some work that we need to do to finalize a civilian review board, and I'm glad that we're partnering on that. Reviewing the Hampton and Yale memorandum of understanding is something that I'm also committed to doing to ensure that when other municipalities, police force do enter New Haven, that reflects our values and we have some accountability there. And last night at the Board of Education, we discussed creating a working group to review the SRO policy and evaluate whether or not SROs are playing the right role in our schools and how that might change. I do think that there's two parts of a broader conversation. One is that we need to have in New Haven about the overall role of police. And I think that's a deeper conversation that we have about who responds to different calls from the community. We get over 100,000 calls for police. And sometimes it might not be right for the police officer to be the first person that responds to certain calls. What is the role? How can we keep our community safe? And oftentimes we jump to police, but there's many other ways that we should be exploring doing that. And I also think that it's important for us to focus not only on police brutality, but on systemic racism that is tied to so many issues around income inequality in the state, affordable housing, access to educational support and funding and resources. All of these things are deeply integrated into the system that we have today that is undermining, in particular, communities of color's ability to have opportunities to succeed. And I think it's important that we obviously have a lot of work to do in New Haven, but it's important that we look at the state and federal levels as well to make really big movements, use this as crisis as an opportunity to start to address these much larger issues that many folks in the community have been working on for many years.
Thank you, Mayor Elicker. I think the best way to do it is if you want to go next, to raise your hand, and then I can recognize you that way. But we do see Assistant Chief Jacobson, and so perhaps he can go next, and then I'll look to see who would raise their hand to follow Assistant Chief Carl Jacobson. Thank you.
The police department would like to thank you for having us in this conversation. We are here for our community. We want to be here for our community. We want to do better. The 8 points, which I believe came from the Black Lives Matter movement that the mayor referenced, I do have a breakdown of how we do things such as banning chokeholds, required de-escalation, require warning before shooting. Willing to email that out, how it breaks down, how we word it, and what is in our policy and procedure. We cover all 8 of those points, but the mayor's right, we could do it a little better. But I would like to send that out in an email form so everybody could look at that. We're also looking at President Obama's presidential task force on policing. We've read through it before. We're going to read through it again and look what can be derived from that. I would like to say that on the mayor's point about different issues of the police and the amount of police we need in a community, we have over the past 7 years reduced violence with less arrests. And I think we're moving in the right direction, but we can even do that more. There were discussions about traffic stops and why we're making traffic stops and different things like that. And, we're here to be a part of the problem, part of the solution, not the problem. And the chief asked me to apologize. He had to be at a police commissioner meeting related to personnel issues, but I know he will be at the next one. But I just want to end by saying I'd like to email those points out to you. I have sent them to some others who asked, and we're here to be part of the solution. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chief Jacobson. And yes, Chief Reyes did say that he had another commitment. The dates conflicted, but that he would try to get on if his meeting ended earlier. But we appreciate Chief Jacobson filling in. I don't see any hands raised. Ronald Higgins. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank you for bringing us into this conversation. I just want to say that we too are committing to the 8 Can't Wait campaign and are equally committed to working with the city, especially on matters of policing. I just want to talk about a few things that I've socialized with others already, but here's some things that we can do now. Um, we've often talked about culture, especially over the last couple of weeks, the culture in police departments. And oftentimes police chiefs have said that we're unable to root out individuals who should not wear the badge and wear the uniform. But it's difficult because of union contracts. I think it's time that we start to focus on police certification. Think of the Police Officer Standards and Training Council as the DMV for police, the regulatory body for policing in the state of Connecticut. I am in full support of expanding the reasons why an officer can be decertified to include excessive use of force and involvement in any bias incident. If we were to do that, if we were to focus on that, even if a chief has disciplined an officer and that officer it can get their job back and go back on the road, depending upon the type of incident, the chief can move to have that officer decertified so the city can employ him, the municipality can employ that officer. But if they lose their license to police, if they lose their certification, they cannot work the street as a police officer. So that's one thing I believe we need to focus on, and that is police certification. Something else that I think we need to look at is who's teaching in our academies. Far often, police officers are teaching one another, especially when it comes to fair and impartial policing. We need to partner. This is an opportunity for us to partner with the academic community and other community experts to bring them into our organizations to talk about race and bias in fair and impartial policing. And the last thing before I move on is we need to assess our curriculum, our academy curriculum. We need to assess or look at how or what the teaching curriculum looks like. What are we teaching our officers about the history of policing in America? It's most likely beginning with Sir Robert Peel. And that to me is analogous to teaching police officers about the Mayflower and Christopher Columbus. We need to start to talk about the hard truths about policing in America and how it started in its tumultuous history, so that officers understand the role that policing has played in Black and brown communities in this country for hundreds of years. Thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies. That was Chief Higgins from Yale Police Department. And I see next our state rep, Tony Walker.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, everybody, and thank you, President Walker Myers, for having this. I want to follow right behind Chief Higgins. I think he is right in the direction that I feel is important, which is trying to provide the community with the security that the people that are out there providing all of us public safety have been managed and evaluated, so that if they get to a point where things are just too stressful, or maybe they've PTSD or whatever, we have to have a better method of evaluating the police mental health. And I think mental health should be something that we in the state, we evaluate judges every 6 years at least. And that is something that we need to institute with police. They need to be evaluated with mental health surveys that are not surveys, mental health servers, to make sure that we have appropriate people making that mental health evaluation, and also not doing it through a self-explained questionnaire. It's got to be taken seriously because we're giving these people the responsibility of our community. And we need to make sure that our community is getting protected and getting supported by all. Transparency is the most important thing that we need to provide to our community, so they feel safe in everything that they do and everywhere that they live. Thank you.
Thank you, State Rep Walker. We have next in the queue, Dory Dumas, NAACP President, and then we'll go to Florida Dwight.
Good evening. Thank you. I do appreciate that we are having this. And our focus is on redressing the institutional racism against our communities everywhere, bring an end to the criminalization of Black people, and dismantle the systems that keep racism, domestic terrorism, and unjust policing going. So we're calling for a sweeping police reform and federal legislation mandating a zero tolerance approach and penalizing and/or prosecuting police officers who kill unarmed, nonviolent, or non-resisting individuals in an arrest. The federal legislations we're calling on have the principles that the use of force continuum for any police department in the country must ensure that there are 6 levels of steps with clear rules of escalation. We're looking at recertification credentials may be denied for police officers if determined that the use of deadly force was unwarranted by federal guidelines. Of course, we want to see the implementation of the Citizens Review Board with subpoena power. So those are just some of the things that we're looking at the NAACP. And we also want to make sure that at some point, the misconduct is public information. If a police officer has a history of that, that's going to be some type of information that the public will know about so that we can have accountability. So yes, we're looking at a sweeping police reform, but we also want to build the community's trust, and we want to make sure that we're holding everyone accountable at every level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure how you pronounce your last name, Florida from the Dwight Management Team. And you'll just, yep, there you go.
Florida Gillespie. Thanks for having me. My concern, and when I was talking with some of the members in our community, mental health checkup for policemen, because 2 of the panels have suggested that. But I think it should be in place that a mental health checkup should be given when you enter the job and during your stay in the job, because I'm sure that's a stressful job, and a lot of jobs have mental health checkups. So to put in a mental health checkup so many months in between times, there is a need for this, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Were there anyone else before we go back to President Walker Myers?
Reverend Ross Lee has had his hand up for a while. I think you just couldn't see it, Alder Furlow.
I see you there. Thank you, Reverend Ross Lee. Please.
Thank you. So I was a little taken aback by the notion of, how we're going to make these things happen. I'm a pastor in the city, private citizen, public position, obviously. I don't have any power outside of my vote and outside of my voice. And so in terms of what I'm going to do, I'm going to raise my voice. I'm going to say the things that I think need to be said. One of the things that I've said is that we need radical change, not just reform around the edges. I think New Haven should do whatever it can, and I don't actually know what that is, but I think New Haven should do whatever it can to join with other states or cities or whatever to get a federal registry so that police officers who are fired for misconduct and other, egregious acts cannot be rehired at in other places, like Florida, unfortunately, my home state, is threatening to do for police officers who've been fired for misconduct and for assault. They are advertising and inviting these police officers to come to Florida to be rehired as police officers. That needs to stop. That definitely needs to stop. I also, of course, the president knows, has put my name forward as an appointee position, but I am not a politician. I don't plan to be a politician, so I don't have that kind of influential power, if you will, to make things happen in this city. But I can raise my voice. I can vote. I can try to persuade. I know people talk about, pastors having all this power. Our congregations are not mindless sheep who just do what we tell them to do. I can try to persuade. That's my responsibility and possibility, but I can't make people do things. So I write, I speak, and I persuade. And I also, like I said, put myself forward to serve. And that is the decision of the persons who are empowered by the vote of the people to make. So that's it.
Thank you, Reverend Ross Lee. And again, I apologize for not seeing your hand earlier. We have next Mr. Cotto, Union President, Police Department. And then we'll have Reverend Grubbs after. I just saw her hand. Thank you. You'll have to, if you would just see if I can help you, just unmute yourself, Mr. Cotto, and you'll be all set.
Oh, can you hear me? Sorry.
There you are. Thank you.
Thank everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this roundtable discussion. I'm saddened that it has to happen in such a way. But first and foremost, as a Black Puerto Rican male, as a police officer, what happened in Minnesota was tragic and unnecessary. And I believe that in New Haven, we need to have a strong presence of character-driven police officers working on behalf of the city of New Haven. I think that open discussions with improvements with state and local leaders to try to save lives and improve lives within the city community is paramount, and I'm here to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cotto. We have Reverend Grubbs.
Yeah, first I want to say that I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be in this meeting. In the background, I hear protesters, and I'm not sure exactly where they are, but they're loud enough to be heard. And I think that a lot of times people are not given the opportunity to make their points be known in a way that really does make a difference and involves in conversation and dialogue. So I guess what I would say is that I think that there are opportunities that we ought to take advantage of for conversation and relationship building, so that there is a way of dealing with situations so that we don't have to actually wait until the crisis to have the conversation. But one of the things that I did say to my staff today is that we can make good use of the crisis and do something positive. I think also, I don't know police officers enough to know that, but I'm sure that their jobs are particularly stressful. And so how do we actually help them to de-stress? And I think the training is critically important to be able to develop those relationships, to understand the stress and to deal with it in such a way that it makes a positive difference in our community. Most of my days are at Christian Community Action, so I serve a range of individuals. Most of them are Black and brown, and I think we also need to, beyond this conversation, think about the economic opportunities that we can create for individuals in our community. And because I think that will also make a difference. But again, I'm happy to be a part of this conversation and have been a part of conversations with clergy about ways in which we could improve the food service delivery system and other things that will really make a difference and improve the quality of life for New Haven citizens.
Thank you, Reverend Grubbs. Just before we go into another round, we'll go back to President Walker Myers, IDC. Reverend Kimber raised his hand, and also Alder Clyburn. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I was having some technical difficulties. Okay. So for those that are attending the meeting, but you're not a panelist, you can also send your suggestions to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov, and we'll compile them for the panelists, and we'll also put them on the city's website. Thank you. Back to you, Alder Furlow.
Thank you, President Walker Myers. Reverend Kimber, you were next.
Thank you very much. I think some hard decisions have to be made locally and statewide. Hard decisions on how we're going to police this community. I think we have looked and continue to look at the syllabus of the New Haven Police Department. They are making some changes. I think that there are some other changes that need to take place. I'm concerned mostly in reference to how do we do community-based policing when we do not have enough police officers to put on the street. The neighborhood does not know the police officers now like they did 10 years ago. I think we got to deal with union issues. If we're going to make some changes, then the union has to be willing to give up some things in reference to their blueness, covering up for officers who are should not be officers. I think that we've got to look at posts, got to look at policies. How do we change policies here in reference to how police officers police across this state? I've been in conversation with Chief Higgins and Yale in reference to how do we bring 169 towns and cities together to police in the same way. And that in this community, police officers need to look like us. And when I say us, they need to look like there are some Black officers that are working in these communities now. And so I think that some hard decisions has to be made from a city standpoint, from a police standpoint, from posts, from a state standpoint, and that legislators have got to be willing to move in the right direction. I've had several conversations with Gary Winfield. I think he's on the right track. But when we talk about cutting police officers in this city, it becomes a problem. When we talk about giving up community-based policing, when we talk about unions not willing to sit and help this community out when it's time to negotiate their contracts, and it's bad. It ain't a good time. It ain't a good time for Black folks in America. And so when you say people are angry, yeah, people are angry, but we're keeping a top on it. But we got to be serious and not allow this to be just a moment. I've seen this 28 years ago with Rodney King, how we came together, and when the marching was over, we went back to the same 400 years of systemic racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kimber. Alder Clyburn?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you?
Do you want us to come back to you, Alder Clyburn?
Yes, come back. Can you hear me, Alder?
We can't hear you. If you like.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, you could come back because I was gonna, I know I'm not on the panel, but I did.
You are on the panel, Alder Clyburn.
Okay, well, I wanted to say what we could do is, make sure that we hire really from New Haven. And then another thing we could do is to make sure that when the officers are being trained, that they have civil rights training, a part of that. Also, we could check them. Also, there should be something for like mental illness or bipolar or biases that they have grown up with. And when it's time to deploy them into different communities, that will, that could help. And they could be true to themselves that, maybe this is not a community that I need to serve. Because, we do bring ourselves, how we were raised, to our work sites. And so those are some things that we could do also to help with this police brutality. The chief from Yale said some, great things too. I don't have to go over those things, but those are some things that I think we should work on that would help.
Thank you, Alder Clyburn. And I failed to mention Alder Clyburn is the chair for the Black and Hispanic Caucus. You see Reverend Scott Marks from New Haven Rising, sir.
Yes, there's been a great deal that has been said already. We're in a really tough time in our history, and there are hundreds of years of a lot of pain and neglect and racism that is coming to a head. I'm excited about the young people, and which is the majority, who are like standing up, fighting for their freedom. And they have a real focus on police brutality. And if we were to have every officer be the best possible officer they could be, right? And a lot of folks talked about the training and ways those things could change. But the problem is, if people go to bed with not enough food to eat, or if there's not, we're shouting about, $15 an hour minimum wage, which will not provide for our folks. The sort of economic disenfranchisement that has happened and continues to happen, and then the police become the place that ends up trying to manage people's anger, or people's hunger, or people's stress. So we definitely should continue this conversation as it relates to what we can do to change the police department. The number one thing that I believe in is organize. And that means people know the people in their community, and they come together and to sort of strive for the kind of communities where we don't actually need police. But I'm telling you, we're not in that moment at this time. But as we push on the police and move forward, and man, is there a lot of stuff that needs to be done. The question about who is training the police and how are they getting, in the suit and on the job. Basically, there has to be a real reckoning with the sort of the many roles that police play. Like when, people are in stress, they call on the police. If, a child has to be removed from the home, sometimes parents get upset. The police have so many wonderful things that they do, but also one of the roles that the police, the National Guards, and Army, Air Force, Marines, and all special forces play a huge role in protecting the wealth of the greedy. And so basically, as we learn to figure out how we're gonna be working on both of those things, and that people have the quality of life that they need, we're gonna be able to move this issue forward.
Thank you, Reverend Marks. We'll return to President Walker Myers.
Thank you. So I'm not just here to host a meeting, and I'm going to encourage people on the panel who haven't spoken to speak, but I'm also here to give my contribution on what I'm gonna do, because I want to bring us back to the question, the second part of the question, what are we prepared to do? Because we know a lot of times that some of these things that we do take work and one person can't do it. We definitely have to make sure we're talking to our community. This conversation is starting small and it's starting just right here. But we're going to have numerous conversations because we're talking about changing a system that has been in place for a long period of time. But from the Board of Alders perspective, we will get the CRB up and running. We actually have a list of candidates. We will put the names in. We also have someone, and I think they're on a call. I saw her earlier, Emma Jones, who will be working with the CRB, and we're going to get it done. What I'm looking for more is, so we know what legislation take, right? So we have to support our legislators when legislation go to Hartford in those places. We can't just be home. We have to go testify. And I just want to make sure that we're going to be on the same page when these things start happening, because in the past, all of us weren't on the same page about a touchy subject like this one right here. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I heard from everybody. I heard from the activists. I heard from children. I heard from teachers. I heard from pastors. I heard from police officers. I heard from everybody saying enough is enough. This culture need to be changed. So now we're at the point, what are you going to do to make that change happen? And I think we have to continuously think about that. And I'm trying to see, I don't have my glasses, so I can't see that well, but I'm trying to see, because we did invite someone from the activist group, because I believe their voice matters in this conversation as well. We have to start putting things together that we're actually going to accomplish. Like leaving this meeting, we should have a goal. We done named a whole bunch of things, but we should have a goal, what we're going to accomplish, because some of these things are right within our reach. Thank you. So I'm encouraging other people to please get on the queue if we haven't heard from you.
How do we put our name in the queue
Thank you, President Welcome.
to hear from us?
There's a way that you can raise your hand. If you select raise hand, then I'll call on you. If you don't see it on your computer, you can just physically raise your hand, and I will recognize you. I'm just keeping the queue. Some are not, some I don't see, some are on and I don't see your picture or your video on. So you'll have to
Oh, this show, I see.
yep, raise your hand that way. So we have some that are in the attendee box that are raising their hand. And so if you can send an email with your comments, then we'll read them and then have them answered by the panelists.
The young lady.
At what,
The young lady.
President Walker Myers, can you give us that email address again?
It's yes, it's public testimony at newhavencT.gov. And I think I can see now the next person in the queue would be from the Black Lives Matter. Right there. I see her.
Yeah, that was me asking how to be put in the queue.
Yeah, there you go.
I definitely wasn't about to email any kind of questions. And so I thank you for inviting me, inviting us for to take place in this call. We appreciate your addition and inclusion in this because as y'all know, our voices are very loud and we will be heard anyway. So it's good to be included on the ground while we're thinking about how we're going to do this work. We just got the Zoom link, so I missed the first portion of the meeting, so please forgive me. And y'all folks are talking about how are we going to divest from the police in our community, and I'm assuming what we're gonna invest in. So reinvest and divest at the same time. And that's what I came to talk on this call about. the community buy-in, especially as far as the CRB. The community definitely does not agree with Ham to be on the board. I think that we were very clear with that, and yet and still he still got elected. So I'm curious as to how is the community going to have a weigh-in, and are you folks going to listen to the community with who y'all further elect into the CRB? Because while we're in this path of defunding and divesting and hopefully one day soon abolition of policing, there needs to be incremental changes that happen to furnish that. And I believe Scott Marks alluded to that a little bit. I do not agree with the fact that police do wonderful things in our community. Those examples directly, I can name many instances in New Haven where the police escalated those situations and made them worse. If we were writing reports down at IA and pen and on computer instead of pencil, we probably would have more record of that. But during the divestment, I believe that we can invest and reinvest into things in our community that are needed, such as transformational justice, but not just in the wording and how we name it, who is going to be doing the work, who's trained, who pays them. I believe that the city should pay into our city in order to seek the changes that we have. We have a lot of violence in our city, unfortunately, but as folks know, there's violence everywhere. And there definitely can be some co-creation between the community and city officials to create those forms of change. And so Black Lives Matter New Haven, one of our demands is that not only do
Okay, stop there for 1 second, because my computer froze. Just give me 1 second. Because I want to
I have a terrible signal too, so I've been jumping in and out of the meeting the whole time.
Okay, I think you can hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is what we're talking about. So first, I want to make sure we understand what your suggestion is of, obviously, to defund or either to figure out a different way of policing, basically to defund police.
No. To divest and reinvest. Divest from policing and reinvest in the community.
Okay, so what the second part to that question is, because we're getting a bunch of different ideas. The second part to that question is, what are you prepared to do to see that through, basically?
Whatever I have to do. If the city officials are willing to work with us and to create transformational justice centers and fund them, then we are willing to work with y'all and finding and locating the proper people, to finding people that are trained. We want people from the city to be employed in these things. We like folks in the tray are killing each other. We need folks in the tray to be doing transformational justice work in the community, not in tandem with the police. The visual of a police officer is more often more traumatizing than what's happening for us. And we can't get past that. The history of policing is slave patrols, Texas Rangers who, murdered indigenous folks. There's no reform that policing can do to mend that chasm. It needs to be abolished and new systems can be put in place and co-created. And some of those folks that are police can be retrained and untrained to undo some of their violent ways that y'all folks are trained into and enter into the community in these transformational justice centers that we know that we need to have, that need to happen. The examples of that are in Oakland, California, and Baltimore there, and as well as some areas, some smaller towns and areas in Houston, Texas. So there's precedent here for this to happen. Along with divestment, we can start by divesting police out of schools.
Okay, stop right there. I can't see you again, but I get it. So this is what we're gonna do, because this conversation is gonna be in multiple phases. So I have your perspective on it too. I'm gonna open it back up to see if other people have perspectives too, because I think I don't know. Can you hear me? Because I think this thing is messing up.
I can hear you.
Okay, because I think what we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to, of course, have more meetings, but we're gonna have to break into smaller groups because people are gonna have to work on some of these things.
Mm-hmm. All of us are gonna have to work on them. Everyone on this call needs to be in a consensus that these things need to happen, inclusive of the police, inclusive of the mayor that's on the call, each and every one of you alders that we put in place. We need to work together, but y'all need to listen to the community because y'all have not been listening to us.
Right. So we're gonna continue to have that conversation because I'm open for that conversation. But I want to make sure this keep flowing since we have a certain amount of time that we should do this in so we could get to the next group because and can you say your name for me? I'm sorry. I can't see it. Allah. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't have your name. I should have asked you that first. So we can continue to have these conversations and I'm gonna see if I can. Well, I can't see anybody. So I'm going to turn it back over to the majority leader who has to keep the queue because I can't see anything right now. I can't. Majority leader, are you there?
I'm here. I got frozen just for a moment.
Yeah, I can't see.
I missed about 20 seconds of what went on.
We're going to look at the queue and see, encourage people who haven't spoken to get on with their ideas too. And then after I'll wrap it up about next steps.
I don't see any hands up just now, Madam President. Just looking through, giving everyone a moment.
And who on the call hasn't spoken? That's a part of the panel.
So we have Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, Miss Emma Jones, Kim Harris from the New Hallville Management Team.
So if any of those people who haven't spoken would like to share some of their ideas, I see your hand up, I think. Let me see.
We have David Boudries, East Rock Management Team. Sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly.
It's fine. It hardly ever gets done correctly. It's not a problem. It's Budries.
Budries. Okay.
Representing the East Rock Community Management Team, I think my job primarily is information dissemination, but it has to go in both directions too, so that what I really want to encourage is some of these uncomfortable conversations that people have not been having, and do that through both the management teams and through just the neighborhoods in general. This particular neighborhood that I have, ranges from Prospect to Cedar Hill. It's a wide variety of people, and it's a fantastic collection of individuals. And I'd like to just try to encourage us to continue to have conversations, to open it up. And that's probably the most important thing. A lot of the elements that have been brought up already that I think are really important, including the constitution of the Civilian Review Board, as well as these ideas of I don't know how one does character-driven police selection, but that sounds like a complicated but necessary kind of reform to look at. Other aspects of how we do policing. For the most part, in this neighborhood, the community policing has been relatively successful. Lieutenant Colon has been a fantastic ally in communicating with us, and she's been very, very receptive to listening. But I just think we have to push for as much conversation as possible to look at every aspect of potential solutions to these problems, which I do believe are in some cases systemic, and to try to address these things as directly and in the most forward manner as possible. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have next Shirley Ellis West from Urban Community Alliance.
Can you all hear me? I think I unmuted myself. Okay. Good evening. And I too want to thank you all for the opportunity to have this dialogue. I think it's a great idea, and it's and it's a first start. And you know, in a challenge, not just in our city but nationally. So it's a first start that I appreciate it, and I'm happy to be participating this evening. So I haven't heard a lot about youth in this conversation. And I think that one of the things that we most certainly need to think about in this dialogue, and then what to do and how to do it, most certainly be focused on our young people in the community. Currently, the messages that they're getting nationally, and some of the things that have happened that many of us understand as being historic, they're really scary for some of our young people. So on one hand, this dialogue needs to, we need to figure out how we help young people to understand historically from our history, what this fight and cause is all about. And then I recall the protest that the young people did on Friday. The New Haven High School students, they most certainly have some things to say. They most certainly want to exercise their voice, and they most certainly need the opportunity to be able to do that. And so I'd like to, just have us think about youth, not in the context of everyone, but specifically focusing on how we build our relationships with, how police departments and law enforcement build relationships with our young people in the community. And to think about that in an intentional way, that these young people can really be supported, that moves the next generation forward, and it with some different perspectives than what I think they share right now. So thank you.
Thank you. If there, oh, I see. Thank you again, Ms. Ellis West. I see Kim Harris, hand is raised from the New Hallville management team.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great stuff. First of all, once again, I want to iterate most of the sentiments here, and thank you for having these conversations. This is wonderful. Just being very short and brief and to the point. I really, really, really just want to encourage ongoing training. And ongoing training in the sense that it's not just for the police, but training for the community, and collaborative training where we come together and we feed off of each other so that we can move agendas forward and we develop our agendas together. I think it's just really important for, especially New Hallville. I feel just very strongly about this being the most underserved community in New Haven, that it's really important for us to be at the table. So that's why I'm just very grateful for this conversation and being invited. But I just really, truly want to encourage the ongoing training and just something that we can collaboratively do together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Were there any others? Oh, we see, I see Reverend Ross Lee.
So my daughter is here with me, and I want to give her an opportunity to say something about, well, let her say it.
Hello, I am Naomi Rossley. I am a now graduate of the New Haven Public School System, and I just believe that police should not be in school buildings. There are some reasons why they're there, and I honestly just believe that it is not conducive to a learning environment. Police being in a learning environment for me has always been an anxiety-inducing experience, because they have a weapon and they have the ability to hurt me or the people that I care about. And I do not feel that is necessary for a learning environment. I should feel safe in my building, not feel like I'm under threat constantly. And the presence of police in schools can set a bad precedence, depending on why they're there and what they do there and how they interact with the students there. And overall, if there is a situation where the police need to be called, they are within driving distance. They can get there if they need to. before then, people can be subdued by the teachers and by whoever else is there to help de-escalate the situation. Because in my experience, they have only escalated the situation, so they should not be in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you for adding your voice, your important voice to this conversation. And congratulations on your achievements in graduation. Congratulations. Was there anyone else before? I see your hand, but your name is not underneath. So yes, you that's raising your hand. I'm sorry, you don't.
Emma Jones.
Yes, yes, Ms. Jones. I'm sorry, I can hardly see your video there. Thank you and welcome.
Okay, thank you so very much. And I'd like to thank every single one of the members of the panel, and most especially to the people who have seen the urgency of bringing us together for this dialogue. I just like to add 3 things that I think is critically important that we need to think about and consider. One is that we definitely should consider having a national database of police officers who engages in the excessive use of force, and that national database should be funneled into the Justice Department so that there's no question about officers who are engaging in that kind of activity. That's number one. And number 2, I think that we should give some consideration to making absolutely certain that psychological training is a part of completion from the police academy. And the third thing, which is a little tricky, but I think that in light of the fact that we believe to a great extent in community-based policing, that it may be useful to think in terms of residential requirement for police officer. If you're gonna police the community, you should be a part of that community that you're policing. I think that when people are a part of a community, that they're more invested in that community when there are people who look just like you, who have a relationship with you and who understand. And so those are just some things that I have off of the top of my head. And I would hope that what we would do is take some time to be more reflective, like to give me the opportunity to reflect some more about what it is that we need to do. Many of you know that I've been a long runner, trailblazer with the whole issue of police brutality. I think I stirred up a movement in 1997. And when I originally emerged, I just want to say this in my closing comment, that as I look around, there weren't, we didn't have the opportunity for this kind of discussion. And we didn't have videotapes, and we didn't have any of the, we didn't have social media. And so this is an opportunity that has emerged today that I prayed for, that God would somehow hear the voices of people who have suffered at the hands of police officers, and that he would make this thing national, worldwide, so that the world will see it. That's my prayer. And so what I'm seeing today, in a lot of ways, is the answer to my prayers. And I really like to encourage all of us, let's take advantage of this and do the right thing. And I'm certainly willing to sit down and, as a survivor, a victim of the worst kind of policing that I've ever seen. And other than, I mean, you can't compare, you know, which is worse. All of it is incredibly bad. And so I think that we're off to a start. Let's continue this dialogue and let's just commit that this is very serious here. And it's a great opportunity for us to really come together. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself and all of the victims that I've known all throughout the state of Connecticut and in other parts of the country that I'm still very much in touch with. So thank you for the opportunity for me to have a voice here.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We appreciate your words. I want to, before we turn it over, I want to thank President Walker Myers for organizing this. And, you know, there's not going to be a quick solution. I was just thinking myself and what I've encountered with just a few negative encounters with police, and my parents and my grandparents and even my great-grandparents. And so my point is that it's happened over the course of many generations, and the answer is not going to come overnight. The answer is not going to come by screaming, but it's going to come by what we're doing today, sitting at the table and having this dialogue and figuring out some real concrete ways to move forward that's going to bring justice and a balance to things that have been lopsided for so long. I'm just looking again to see if there's anyone else in the queue who wanted to say anything before we give it back first to our mayor, Justin Elicker, to have a comment, and then to our president, our Board of Alder's president, Taisha Walker Myers, to have her statement and close it or whatever she wants to do because it's her meeting. Yes, we'll hear from Assistant Chief Carl Jacobson.
Just briefly, a lot of stuff people said has moved us, and I just wanted to say to the president, Walker Myers, that what are you prepared to do? We're prepared to do whatever it takes to get our community to trust us again. And when Ms. Jones was speaking, I could see a police academy where she comes in and tells officers what her story is and what happened to her. I want people from the community to come in that have experienced police brutality and talk to new officers about what it feels like, what happened, and how we stop it. And even Ms. Dumas from the NAACP, we need everybody in our police academy telling their stories and helping us fix that. I just felt compelled to say that, and thanks again for organizing this, and we're here to do whatever it takes.
Thank you, Chief. President Walker Myers, did you want to go first and introduce the mayor, or did you want the mayor to speak before you?
The next time I speak, I'm gonna be wrapping it up.
Okay.
So he
Great.
can go before me.
Great.
I'll be
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alder Furlow, and thank you, President Walker Myers, for organizing this. I've done a lot of listening and thinking, and a lot of different conversations over the last week and a half, in so many different forms with a lot of different people. And I did want to highlight one thing that I think is really important for all of us moving forward, because it's clear that we need to have a lot more conversations. And I do think it's very important to find very practical and concrete actions. At the protest on this past Friday, there were 5,000 people. And Allah was talking earlier on. And I hope that people in this group and in my generation, in an older generation, are open to listening and thinking about that voice. There were so many people that have the opinion that we should defund our police. A lot of people. And you know, I have to admit the idea sounds radical to me. But I think the spirit of the idea where we live in a world where we don't need police because we're addressing the roots of the problem and not the symptoms is a good one. And I do think that we should think more deeply about what that means. It's not like tomorrow we can defund the police, right? But there may be different ways that we approach policing. And I think if we leave this situation with maybe some more mental health support for our officers, maybe some improvements in our use of force policy, that's good, but it's not, it doesn't give justice to the crisis we're in. I really think we need to try to think very deeply about what safety in our communities mean and make sure that we're providing a venue for many people that have this very strong opinion about a new way of thinking about that to be part of this dialogue. I'm not exactly sure where that will end. I'm really not. But I've learned more about this in the last week and a half than I have in probably my lifetime. And I think it's really important for us to be open to that conversation and to dig deep. Thank you. And thank you again for organizing this, this venue.
Thank you, Mayor Elicker. Just before our president closes, I think it would just be right for me to at least quickly recognize President Walker Myers, the alders that were on the call or that had been on the call that weren't part of this panel. So I'll just read their names very quickly. We have Alders Marshad, Alder Roth, Alder Festa, Alder Carmen Rodriguez, Alder Charles Decker, Alder Eli Sabin, Alder Ellen Kupo, Alder Jerry Antunes, Alder Singh, Alder Kim Edwards, Alder Ron Hurt, Alder Stephen Winter. Those are the alders that I see currently. There may have been others that were on the call at some point and aren't on now. And so we thank our alders, the Board of Alders, those that have come to participate or to at least listen in on this call. Thank you.
Alder Morrison is here, Alder, Mr. Majority Leader.
And you came right in. I didn't see you here. You're part of the panelists. Let me recognize you, Alder Morrison, President Pro Tem, and ask if you had anything you wanted to add to the discussion before we give it to President Walker Myers to close.
Oh, everything that was said, I had to work and then I jumped in. I kept jumping in and out between getting kicked out. But I just want to thank President Walker Myers and Senator Gary Holder Winfield for holding such a powerful conversation. This is the beginning, and the only way that we're going to get anywhere is if we talk to one another. And so I thank you guys, and I look forward to the many conversations that I know we have to have down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. I also see Alder Jody Ortiz. Sorry I missed you before. And there's a number of people that are also here from the mayor's administration. And so we will just recognize, so I don't miss anyone, we'll recognize the department head. Sean Madison, Chief of Staff, is here also. And so we thank you for being here. And all the attendees, we thank you. If I didn't call you by name, it doesn't mean that we don't recognize and respect you being here on this call with us this evening. And with that, I will turn it back to our president, Alder Taisha Walker Myers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Now you see why he's the majority leader. He just did all the thank yous that I was gonna do. So that was perfect. No, but seriously, when I started to come into this conversation, I wasn't worried, but I was like, I really want this conversation to be one where people could actually say how they feel and what they're willing to do, so we can break people up into groups. I'm gonna have Al Lucas do a sheet so that we know the kind of the categories, and we need to get this out to the community, because I think we have to have community involvement in these conversations. You know, I've been in New Haven all of my life. I've been Black all my life, and I have plenty of family that live here. And they had a number of different experiences, good and bad, with the police. I just want to make sure that we have a police department where just because you are from New Hallville and you are Black, you're not considered a criminal. And I think all of us should have that when we're walking down the street, that the police is there to protect us, not judge us. And I think we're moving forward in those conversations. And I appreciate Assistant Chief, you being here, having an open and honest conversation with us. I appreciate the union president being here because we're going to have some really tough conversations. And one thing I didn't hear that I meant to add when I was speaking earlier was we, just like when people are on the streets, they don't like to tell, they don't like to talk. I think it's the same culture in the police department.
So we know how technology is. She froze, and so she'll be back in just a moment. While she's unfreezing, I didn't recognize our third officer, Alder Sal DeCola. Thank you, Alder DeCola.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's back in another corner. So as soon as she unmutes herself, we'll finish hearing from her. Thank you.
Yes, I'm on 2 devices because I don't know what be happening sometimes. But I think that they should have an outlet to look. Did this so it could be addressed. But thank you to everyone on the panel. I really appreciate it. I think this dialogue have to continue. I think we have to expand out to more people. And I'm just excited that we had the opportunity to do this. And I think now is a time where we will make some real change in our police department and in the state. I'm a firm believer that we will do it. We're not going to keep picking it up and putting it down. We have to be consistent, and we have to be consistent in this moment right now. And on behalf of the board, we will continue these conversations. And I'll reach out to each and every one of you to let you know when the next one will take place. Thank you, everybody. Please be safe. Make sure you're wearing your mask. Make sure you're washing your hands because COVID-19 is still out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Get out. Okay.
You just press leave webinar.
Okay. Thank you.